What is the main event of UFC 300? That is the topic everyone has been talking about because we do know the rest of this card is pretty much full. We have 11 fights announced so far, 2 title fights if you include the BMF belt. We got Zhang Weili versus Yan Xiaonan and Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway, but we still don't know the main event. And if you look in the background of some videos, you can see on Dana's board that there is still a blank spot in the main event slot, and there also appears to be another blank spot down in the prelims. So it seems like we're going to get at least 2 more fights, and we do know cards typically have 13 to 14 fights in total, so that leaves room for 2 to 3 more fights. We also don't know if the co-main has been announced yet. We're not sure if Gaethje versus Holloway is, or maybe there's another fight they're waiting to announce, like Leon versus Bilal too. But Dana has been hyping up this main event for a few weeks now. He's saying, you won't believe it, it's gonna blow everyone away, you guys won't believe it when it's announced, and he's expected to announce what the main event will be this week. So let's try and figure out what it is. I'm gonna go through every single division, every single possible fight, retired fighters, fighters in other organizations, and we're going to figure out what this main event is. We're going to first look at all the possible title fights you could put on. So we do know UFC 300 takes place right after Ramadan, so all the Muslim fighters on the roster like Islam, like Magomed Ankalaev, Shavkat, Hamzat, these guys aren't going to fight. Even retired fighters like Khabib aren't going to fight on the card because they're not going to go through a training camp during Ramadan. And the main event also can't include a fighter who already has a fight booked for 298, 299, any of the fight nights. For example, Sean O'Malley fights a month before UFC 300, so he's not going to fight there. Volkanovski fights 2 months before. So that leaves the flyweight, lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight division. Now, no offense to Alejandro Pantoja, but he is not the star. He's not going to headline UFC 300. Dana said we're going to be blown away with this main event, and any fight with Pantoja versus Albazi, which will most likely happen next, is not going to blow anyone away. It's also not that big of a fight, and Pantoja already came out and said that he's going to be fighting on that Brazil card after, so he's not going to be the main event. Islam also most likely will not be the main event because it is during Ramadan, and he doesn't really have someone to fight. Charles, Justin, and Arman are all fighting on UFC 300 against different opponents, unless he fights like Mateusz Gamrot, but that would not blow anyone away, and Islam is supposedly hurt. Leon Edwards could absolutely headline the card, and there's really only 3 guys who could headline against. There is Islam, who has been rumored to fight Leon, would go up to welterweight and try and become a double champ, but again, it is during Ramadan, so I don't see that happening. There's also Shavkat, but again, Ramadan, he's not going to fight. The only guy on the roster I see fighting during Ramadan is Bilal Muhammad, and Leon has already said that he is going to fight on UFC 300, and Bilal has said he's going to fight Leon, and it's been reported that Bilal vs. Leon 2 is in the works. But at the same time, this fight would not blow anyone away. This fight has already happened once. We saw how it was going and how it probably would have panned out, and honestly, not a lot of people care to watch Bilal fight. He's viewed as boring by most of the fans, but this is absolutely a possibility. And then we got Dricus. Dricus is interesting because he did just fight not too long ago. It would be only a 3-month turnaround, which is quick, but is doable, and he did say he wanted to fight on the card. And there's obviously him versus Adesanya. Now, would that fight blow anyone away? I don't think so. Maybe it would blow some of the casual fans away, but it would be a big fight. It would be a fun fight. The history between these two could definitely get people interested. Izzy's also a pretty big star. You also have Dricus versus Strickland too, but Dana has said that they're not going to do the rematch between them just yet. Now, I know Dana's word is as good as nothing. He says something one day and then immediately turns around the next, so this is still a possibility. But we did just get this fight, and although it was a cool fight, I don't think it blew anyone away when it was announced. I don't think it would blow anyone away if it was announced again. You do have Cannonier right there, but it seems like they don't want to give him a title shot, and I think he's injured. And then obviously there is Hamzat, but he's not going to fight during Ramadan. Now hear me out. Dricus versus Leon. Leon has said he wanted to go up to middleweight at some point, and out of all these fights I have talked about so far, this one would surprise me the most. But at the same time, there are so many contenders at welterweight and so many contenders at middleweight that I don't really see the UFC wanting to have Leon fight for double champ, especially with how inactive he typically is. And then we got Alex Pereira, who is the light heavyweight champ. Now, there are really only 3 guys I could see him fighting. There is obviously the 3rd fight with Israel Adesanya. Now, would that blow anyone away? I don't think so. We've seen that fight twice, 4 times if you include their fights in kickboxing. But it would still be a fun fight. Anytime these two fight each other, it's amazing. And it's one of the biggest fights you can put on that doesn't include Conor McGregor. Between 2 of the biggest stars, it would sell a lot of pay-per-views. It would get the casual audience excited, it would get the hardcore audience excited, but I'm not sure it would blow anyone away. There's also Jamal Hill, who did vacate the light heavyweight title, and there's a little background there with Jamal Hill beating Glover, who's Alex's like best friend. Now, Jamal Hill did have surgery to repair his torn Achilles back in November, and from all the research I'm doing, it's between 6 to 9 months for a full recovery, which does put him right around the April timeframe to return, but he is also in some legal trouble with the domestic abuse stuff, so I don't really see it being Jamal Hill versus Alex. And then hear me out, and the more I have thought about this, the more I have thought this is a strong possibility for the main event of UFC 300. Alex Pereira versus Dricus. Now, I don't know if it would take place at light heavyweight or if it would take place at middleweight. We do know Alex said before Sean Strickland won the belt that he wanted to go back down and get his middleweight championship back. But then when Strickland beat Adesanya, because him and Strickland are friends, he said, I'm not going to go down and fight my friend. But now Dricus, who beat Sean Strickland, is the champ. So there is a storyline, goes down there and avenges his friend, regains his middleweight title. And Dricus has also talked about wanting to go up to light heavyweight at some point. And both of these guys say they want to fight on UFC 300. So I would not be surprised if this is it. And I think it would surprise a lot of people. I don't know if it would blow anyone away, but it would definitely surprise people. Maybe it would blow away the casual fan. Other than that, there's not really anyone for Alex to fight. He's not going to fight Yuri or Rakic because they're fighting on the same card. He's not going to do a rematch with Jan, who's coming off a loss and I think is hurt. Ankalaev isn't going to fight because of Ramadan, but he could go up to heavyweight and fight one of Tom Aspinall or John Jones, more likely Tom Aspinall. This was rumored, and he did sort of tease this on his Instagram story a few months back. It could potentially be a very fun fight. We know that Tom Aspinall doesn't really have an opponent right now, and it would definitely be a spectacle seeing Alex Pereira fight for a belt in 3 different divisions with the chance to become a triple champ. It would also make sense because there really isn't anyone else for Tom Aspinall to fight, especially if John Jones and Stipe won't fight him. You do have Ciryl Gane, but he has made it pretty clear that he doesn't want to fight Ciryl. It seems like most likely he's going to wait for the winner of Curtis Blades and Jailton Almeida, who are fighting a month before, so they won't be ready for 300. There is also Aspinall versus Stipe. We do know it looks like Stipe is waiting for the John Jones fight and doesn't want to fight Aspinall and has turned down the fight with him, but that's still a possibility and honestly makes a ton of sense. But again, would that blow anyone away? I don't think so. Stipe could also fight John Jones. We do know Jones tore his pectoral and had surgery, and I think it's only a 4 to 6 month recovery, maybe an 8th month recovery, so he could be ready in time for 300. And it seems like he wants to fight Stipe, Stipe wants to fight him, and the UFC wants to do Jones versus Stipe. But again, that would not blow anyone away. We've been expecting that fight. That fight was already booked once and people didn't really care too much, besides the fact that John Jones was fighting. Then you do have Tom Aspinall versus John Jones, and at this point this would surprise me because of everything John's saying he doesn't really want to fight Tom Aspinall, all those Twitter back and forth. But imagine that was all a ploy just to get people talking about them, get people excited for the fight, and then they announce it for 300. This, honestly, out of every single possible fight, would probably be the one that would get me the most excited. But again, John did tear his pec. He is probably not ready from injury yet. And then the female divisions, I mean, Grasso versus Shevchenko 3 is not going to headline the card. That could still be on the card. That could be a co-main, but it's not going to headline the card. And then you do have Raquel Pennington. She did just fight. Again, it would be a quick turnaround, but I mean, who's she going to fight? Nunes? That's probably not going to be a headliner. Ronda Rousey return? I don't think people really care about Ronda Rousey anymore, and I'm going to talk more about Ronda Rousey in a minute. So we have gone through every single title fight that I think could possibly headline the card. Now we're going to talk about non-title fights. There's only one guy who would blow anyone away that could headline this card, and that is obviously Conor McGregor. Now, there's not really too many options for him. A lot of the guys he was rumored to fight, like Dustin in a 4th fight, Justin Gaethje for the BMF belt, Charles Oliveira, Leon Edwards, all these guys he's been talked about fighting, they all have fights booked besides Leon. So I guess Conor versus Leon is a possibility, but the only 2 people I've seen that I think have a good chance of fighting him are Nate Diaz and Michael Chandler. But Nate Diaz is scheduled to have a boxing match with Jorge Masvidal literally the month before, so I think more likely than not it will be Conor versus Chandler if Conor is going to headline the card. But then again, Conor did say he was fighting Chandler in June, so why would he say that if he was going to fight on 300? Could have been a way to get the UFC to make this fight happen. We have seen both Chandler and Conor have agreed on Twitter to fight on UFC 300, and they've both been talking about wanting to fight on UFC 300, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is the main event, and this would definitely surprise a bunch of people. Next, let's look at some of the retired fighters. We did see Brock Lesnar come out of retirement to fight on UFC 200. He also fought on UFC 100, so could he fight on 300. I doubt it. I don't know who he'd fight. Maybe Stipe versus Brock Lesnar. Fedor also just retired. Maybe we see Stipe versus Fedor as the main event. Two legends, the two greatest heavyweights of all time in my opinion. But would that really get anyone excited? I feel like most of the casual fans don't even know who Fedor is. There is Khabib, who would be crazy. That would definitely surprise me more than probably anyone else. But again, it's during Ramadan, and I don't even know who he would fight besides Leon Edwards. You got GSP versus Anderson Silva. That's a possibility. They're both retired. They're both around the same age. They were both supposed to fight way back in the day. That would be interesting, I guess. Or they could fight someone else, but I don't know who they would fight. Maybe Nick Diaz. Is Nick Diaz retired? I don't know. Maybe Chris Weidman versus Silva. But I actually think Weidman has a fight scheduled, so it's not going to be that. You got guys like Jose Aldo, TJ Dillashaw, Tyron Woodley, but I don't see any of those guys coming back, and I especially don't see them headlining UFC 300. You also got Ronda Rousey. I don't know who she would fight. Maybe she'd come back and fight for the belt. Maybe she'd fight Amanda Nunes, who did hint at a return. But do people really care about Ronda Rousey at this point? She hasn't fought in like 5 years. In the last few times she fought, she got knocked out by Holly Holm. She got knocked out by Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes is also there, but I don't know who she would fight, and it definitely would not be a big enough fight to headline UFC 300. So there's not really any retired fighter that I see headlining the card. There is GSP, there is Anderson Silva. If they fought each other, it would be cool, and I definitely would not be expecting it. So then the only other place to look is at other MMA organizations and other combat sports, and the only two guys I can think of that would even have a chance at headlining UFC 300 would be Francis Ngannou and Demetrius Johnson. I don't see Demetrius Johnson ever coming back to the UFC, and I don't think he'd be a big enough star to headline UFC 300. Francis, on the other hand, absolutely could. We do know the UFC is working somewhat with the PFL, I guess, to get Kayla Harrison, because I'm pretty sure she did still have one fight left on her contract, so I don't know how they got her. But could they do some sort of cross promotion? It's possible, but Francis is fighting a month before against Anthony Joshua in a boxing fight. And to be honest, I don't think Francis and Dana like each other, and the PFL and the UFC also don't really seem to like each other, obviously, because they're competitors, so I doubt this happens. And then I look at other combat sports. There's no jiu-jitsu practitioners, there's no wrestlers, there's no kickboxers that have a big enough name to headline 300. There are some boxers. Maybe we see Deontay Wilder in MMA. He's talked about it. Maybe we see Tyson Fury, even though he has a boxing match against Alexander Usyk 2 months before. You have Terrence Crawford, who I think is most likely out of all of them because he does have some wrestling. I have seen him throw kicks before, and it doesn't look bad. He's very athletic. He's the best boxer on the planet, in my opinion. But he has said that he'll never try MMA. He said that on the Joe Rogan podcast. So that is every possible UFC 300 main event I could come up with. Watch it just be none of those now. If I had to take a guess, I think most likely it will be Izzy versus Alex 3 or Izzy versus Dricus, or potentially Alex versus Dricus. I think most likely will be Alex or Izzy versus someone will be the main event. And I think there's a good chance they have like Leon versus Bilal as the co-main event. I also think there's a good chance they do Conor versus Michael Chandler as the main event. You do have Conor versus Nate, but again, Nate is scheduled to have a boxing match with Jorge Masvidal, and Nate's not even in the UFC right now. They could potentially do Conor versus Tony, but Tony is on a 6 loss streak, something like that. But they were both at the top of the lightweight division around a similar time, and it would be one of the easier matchups for Conor. I have also seen rumors that they're going to create a 165 and 175 division and then just get rid of the 170 division. So maybe that's the surprise, and they're going to have like Leon versus Bilal for the 175 and Conor versus Chandler for the 165. But Dana is supposed to announce the main event this week, and I will be talking about it and covering it and announce it the second it happens. So subscribe so you don't miss that. I will also have my predictions for this weekend's fight night coming out tomorrow or later tonight. So make sure you turn on post notifications so you don't miss those. Like the video if you did enjoy. Leave your prediction for this main event in the comments down below. I think it will most likely be Izzy versus Alex 3. That is my pick. And I will see you guys in the next one, which will be my prediction video.